we are going to start our reading lesson today. I am so proud of each one of you for being ready to go for learning. You are awesome. Today we're going to start talking about our community and how did we become the state of Indiana. We have talked a lot about a long time ago when Native Americans were here. But then what happened? Today, that is our topic that we are going to learn about together. We're going to start by watching some videos. I need all students showing focused attention, listening, and learning with me. Here we go. So far, we have learned a lot about communities, who was here first, like the Native American people, and we've talked about immigration, when people move to a new country. Today we're going to start talking about something new. We are going to explain why and how our local community was established here in the United States and in Indiana. And we're going to identify its founders and early settlers. Today, we're really going to focus on level 2. We're going to focus on understanding and using the vocabulary that we need in order to learn about this topic. Okay, so we have talked about Native Americans. We've talked about immigration. Now we're going to put those ideas together. What happened on this land when people from Europe came and immigrated to these lands? We know they met Native Americans, but what happened after that? We're going to learn more about that today. Today we're going to start by learning some vocabulary words that will help us with this topic. We're going to watch a video and we're going to practice saying these definitions together by using our bodies. Let's see an example. Colonies are small communities and towns that people made. Okay, so this is our practice round. In the video, I say the word and then I read the definition. You can see the definition right here. And I have motions that go with it. I want you to read it and practice with me so that you are learning new vocabulary words. Here we go. We're going to practice it. You listen first, then we're going to do it together as a team. Colonies are small communities and towns that people made. Okay, now you're going to do it with me. We're going to say the word. Then we're going to read the whole sentence. Ready? Colonies. Colonies are small communities and towns that people made. Let's try it again. I need to see those arms moving. Do your motions with me so that you are learning as many vocabulary words as you can. Here we go. Colonies are small communities and towns that people made. Great job. Awesome. Let's try our next vocabulary word. Listen to the video first, then we'll practice together. Establish means to create, build, and make permanent. Let's listen again and then practice. I already see Landon ready. Great job. Establish means to create, build, and make permanent. All right, we're going to say the word, then we're going to read the definition and do our motions. Ready? Establish. Establish means to create, build, and make permanent. Permanent is like strong. If you see the picture here, I noticed that these guys are building with bricks. If you build something with bricks, it's pretty permanent. It's going to be there a long time because it's really strong. So we are going to learn about this word establish. When somebody creates something, they build it, and it stays there a long time because it's strong. It's now established. So our example says it was not easy for the colonists to establish communities with their own rules, homes, jobs, and food. We're going to begin thinking about when people moved here, they had to establish their own home. There was nothing here except the Native Americans. They had to come here. They had to build homes. They had to create jobs. They had to plant their food. And they had to live together in a community. They had to create, build, and make permanent their whole community. That was a hard job for them to do. Okay, let's try our next word. Our next word is founders. Can you say founders? Great. We're going to listen to the example, then we will practice doing the definition. Here we go. Founders are people who started something first. All right, let's listen one more time and think about what's a founder? Founders are people who started something first. Okay, working together, we're going to say the word, then read the sentence using our motions. Ready? Founders. Founders are people who started something first. So when we think about our country, we know that the first people were the Native Americans. They lived here before anybody else. But then somebody had to move here. Because you and I are not all Native Americans. Somebody had to move here first. We know those are called immigrants. When they got here, they had to create and build and establish their whole community. We call these people founders because they did it first. They were the people who moved here and started creating communities and towns. And then lots of years later, we live here. So founders were the people who started something first. You might also hear this word when somebody talks about an idea like a company. If you are the founder of a company, you maybe had the idea first. You were the first person to do something. Our example says some of the first immigrants were the founders who began to set up a new country. The founders were people who worked hard to create and build and make permanent our country. Okay, let's try our next word. Next word, we're going to listen, then practice together. Colonists were the people who made the colonies. Let's listen one more time and get ready to practice the definition. Colonists were the people who made the colonies. Okay, so colonists is another word. You ready? Here we go. Colonists. Colonists were the people who made the colonies. Good. I see some arms moving, doing those motions with me. Let's try that one again. Ready? Colonists were the people who made the colonies. When immigrants moved here, they started setting up a few communities. We call these people colonists because they were the ones who made the very first communities after the Native Americans. So we know Native Americans had their own communities. These were the first immigrant communities. And they might have looked like this. I noticed in the pictures that their clothes look different than the clothes we wear now. A lot of times girls had to wear dresses. I noticed that they are planting their own food, and they don't have cars like we do. They use animals and they pull wagons. So this was a long time ago, around the time of Native Americans. And they had to work hard to build and create their own community. There was nothing here. There was only trees and mountains and rivers. They had to build and create everything in their own community. Our example sentence says, colonists built their own homes and planted crops in order to survive. Crops is another word for plants. Awesome. Let's try another word. Settlers. Are you ready? Settlers were the people who moved to new land and lived there. Okay, let's listen again and get ready to practice this new word. Settlers were the people who moved to new land and lived there. Okay, practice it with me. We're going to say the word and then the definition and use our motions. Ready? Settlers. Settlers were the people who moved to a new land and lived there. So a settler is kind of like an immigrant. This is another word that we use to describe the people who moved to our country and they settled there. They lived there. So our example says, settlers are like colonists because they started their own communities. So there are lots of words that people use to describe the people who lived here first. Founders are people who started something first. Colonists are the name of people who built their own colonies. And settlers are the name of people who moved to a new place and live there. So a lot of these words are very similar. A lot of them describe the people who came here first. Okay, next, boys and girls, we are going to watch some videos that are going to help us think about today's task. We have now learned some vocabulary. It's time for us to watch some videos. Eyes and ears focus. Keep that attention. Let's learn a lot today. Today we're going to focus on how the immigrants got here to the new lands. On Thanksgiving week, we read a text about the Pilgrims and their voyage or their trip to this new country. We're going to watch another video today, and we're going to read a text today that will talk all about their journey to the new country. Okay, we're going to watch this video about some of the immigrants. We know that immigrants came to our country, and here they met Native Americans. Today we're going to read about that, and we're going to watch a video about that to continue building our knowledge of how did our community, how did it get created? Who built it? Who were the people who created it and built it to establish our community?
We just had the most amazing family vacation.
After trade and communication between Europe and the Americas began following Columbus's voyage in 1492, many Europeans began to seek opportunities in the New World. One such group, now known as the Pilgrims, sailed from England to North America in 1620. Some of them wanted to sail to America because they thought they could make money there. Some of them were looking for greater religious freedoms. They all thought that a new life in a new land could give them what they were looking for. In the summer of 1620, a ship called the Mayflower, as well as a second ship called the Speedwell, set sail from England towards the Americas. Shortly after their journey began, however, the Speedwell sprang a leak, and they had to stop to make repairs. They set sail again, but they had only traveled a few hundred miles from England when the Speedwell began leaking again, forcing both ships to return to Plymouth. By then it was September, and the Pilgrims decided to abandon the Speedwell. Some of the Speedwell's passengers moved on to the Mayflower, and some decided to stay in England. On September 6th, 1620, the Mayflower set sail a third time for the Americas. Around 130 people were crammed onto the small Mayflower. About 100 were passengers, 70 adults, and 30 children. The rest were the ship's crew. There were animals on board the Mayflower as well: pigs, goats, chickens, and even some pet dogs. The ship was only 106 feet or 32 meters long and 25 feet or 7.5 meters wide, so the voyage was extremely crowded. When the weather was bad, the passengers had to stay below deck while the ship rocked and tilted in the waves. Many people were sick for the entire trip. 2 people died, and 1 baby was born while they crossed the ocean. For those who were well, it must have been a long and boring journey. Some passengers read books or played card games, but by the time they arrived in the New World, they must have been very glad for the voyage to end. Land was sighted on November 9th, but there was a problem. They had landed too far north. The original destination of the Mayflower was supposed to be Virginia, but storms and rough seas had blown them off course, so they had landed at what is now Massachusetts. They tried to sail south, but by now the winter weather had made the seas stormy, and so they decided to stay, and anchored in the harbor at Cape Cod on November 11th. They looked around for a good place to settle, and by December they had moved to a place they named Plymouth. The first winter in the New World was a terrible one for the passengers of the Mayflower. They were not prepared for the cold weather. They did not have enough food. Terrible sicknesses came. By the time the spring of 1621 came, only about half of the passengers and crew were still alive. In April, the Mayflower and her crew returned to England, leaving the Pilgrims to try and survive alone. They might all have died that year, if it were not for the help they received from the Native Americans that lived in their area. One man in particular, named Squanto, taught the English settlers many things that they needed to know. He taught them how to plant corn, how to fish, and how to live in their new home. He knew how to speak English, and helped interpret for the settlers and the Wampanoag tribe so that they could speak to each other. That fall, there was a good harvest and plenty of food. The Pilgrims had a celebration that lasted for 3 days, and they invited their new friends, the Wampanoags, to celebrate with them. This feast is often called the First Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoyed learning the story of the Mayflower and the First Thanksgiving today. Goodbye till next time.
All right, so we have just started connecting our stories. We know all about communities. We know that the Native Americans lived here first, and now it's time for us to start thinking about, well, what happened when immigrants moved here? How did they create the communities that now we have today? Your reading task today is called Establishing the Community. This task will help us learn more about the journey that the immigrants had. We call those immigrants pilgrims. When they moved and settled in the new country, which is now America, they had a very hard time. We just saw a video about what happened when these people decided to immigrate or move to the new lands. Today, you are going to think about the new vocabulary and think about how does that connect to the book we're going to read today. Your first job is to read the Mayflower on Epic, and then your second job is to answer questions. Today, you have slides 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They are all about the text. Let's do 3 as an example. It gives you a question that goes with the page of text. Our question said, how did the pilgrims travel to a new land? I see my question word. How did the pilgrims travel to a new land? I can use my text evidence and my picture clues to help me. The text says the pilgrims rode out to the Speedwell and the Mayflower, the ships that would transport them across the vast ocean. But water leaked through the Speedwell's planking. Some of the passengers decided to abandon the voyage. Others crowded aboard the Mayflower. So using my background knowledge and picture clues, I see that they are getting on boats or ships. The text also tells me there were ships that would transport them across the vast ocean. I have now seen text words and text pictures that help me answer the question. How did the pilgrims travel? They traveled in ships. Next, I can type my answer to the question. The pilgrims traveled in ships. The pilgrims traveled in ships. I highlighted my evidence and typed a complete sentence. I also checked for capital letters and ending punctuation marks in my sentence to make sure it is a third grade sentence. Slides 8 and 9 are a little bit different because you don't have to use text evidence. These are questions to get you thinking about your opinion, your perspective. For slides 8 and 9, you do not need to use text evidence. You can just give me your thoughts by writing a complete sentence for each. But on slides 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you need text evidence like we've practiced. Okay, I hope that you enjoy reading your text, using text evidence to answer questions, and then sharing your thoughts, your opinions on the journey. When you're done, you'll push the green check to turn in. Today, boys and girls, I am going to be taking a grade. I'm going to be looking at your complete answers to see, are you using capital letters and punctuation? Are you writing as a third grade student?